Welcome to the Champions Circle. Once again, we are blessed to be here. We are excited to highlight and showcase amazing individuals from our community that are changing the world and that have great stories to tell. Stories of inspiration, stories of service, and stories that will light up other people's lives. And so I want to thank Liga de Justicia Abogados, Liga de Justicia Foundation, all of our viewers, all of the folks who have shared and liked the amazing podcast that we have and the amazing stories that we've heard so far. And today is different. It's not different than all of the other podcasts that we've had. Another amazing individual from our community, someone who I consider an inspiration to me, to my daughter, to our community, someone who I consider a friend and colleague. And we have none other than Alicia McGrath. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. I'm really moved by this invitation, particularly because it's Women's History Month. And I wanted to thank Liga de Justicia Foundation and the organization, the great work you do with all the community partners that support both our organizations.
Yes, absolutely. And when you say both of our organizations, we could not do it without you, without your leadership, without the organizations that collaborate and partner with us. And so we thank you as well. And as I mentioned, we are inspired by you each and every day. And we hope that our viewers will listen carefully to the great story that you have to tell. So Alicia, I always like to start in the beginning. I go back to, being an old head. I go back to that, this is your life, right? So let's talk about, where were you born, and let's talk about your family and your foundation.
Okay. So I was born in Queens, in Jamaica, Queens, at Jamaica Hospital, to a mom who was 16 years old when she had me. She was a little bit over 16. And my dad, who'd come from Peru. She was born in Puerto Rico. And they lived in Queens at the time, but before that they had lived in the Bronx. So we had that whole family living all together, with the abuelitas and the tias and the titis and everybody together. And it was really wonderful to have that growing up until I was around 8 years old.
Okay.
So it was a really great experience.
So it's very similar to the current immigrant experience, mm-hmm. right? Multi-generational, everyone kind of teaming together to pay expenses and to mm-hmm. hopefully uplift each other in some way, right? Absolutely. So now from a multicultural background, tell us how that affected your childhood.
I think it was such a gift. I'm thinking about my grandfather who came here from Puerto Rico. I'm bringing my mom and her siblings and my grandmother, who I was very, very close to. He had a sort of parish community. He was a preacher. And he brought all these folks together in the community, including my dad, and that's how my mom and dad got together. And I think bringing the Puerto Rican culture and the South American culture together, even though they're similar, they're quite different, and different traditions. So I definitely had different traditions on my father's side than I did on my mother's side. And I think it actually informed me from a very young age about the value of family and connection, particularly since we were all together all the time, doing things. I feel really fortunate that I was able to learn from my grandparents on my father's side, for example. They came from the Cusco, Machu Picchu area, and they spoke Quechua, which was, the indigenous language of Peru. And so when they didn't want us to know what they were saying, they stopped speaking Spanish and they spoke Quechua, which I thought was really cool. And then, on my mother's side, they had their own little tricks and whatever that they would do. But it was great because bringing together like the food and the culture and just melding them together was a great thing for me. And it made me appreciate, as I grew up and later in life, other cultures as well. So learning about other people. So I was very fortunate.
Okay. So what did your parents do for a living? How did they balance family and obviously financial responsibility?
Yeah, so this is an interesting story. My dad came here when he was 18 years old. He graduated from Military Academy in Lima, and he had nowhere. He had no one to connect with, and he was homeless, essentially, when he first got here. Tried to connect with some friends from the academy, But was such an entrepreneur and so ambitious, and I feel like I've gotten a little bit of those qualities, that he determined that he was going to make a success of his life, and he started working in the garment industry in the fur district. So he eventually made his way, long story short, to own the largest fur factory showroom in New York City, 333 7th Avenue on the 16th floor, and was interviewed also on the radio to talk about his accomplishments and how he got from being homeless on the street to owning the largest fur factory showroom. So his I guess his income and that he was able to get was from working initially in the factories, learning every aspect of the business, which he taught us, and then moving on to becoming an owner operator, and then growing that in different locations in Santo Domingo, in Spain, and he's been like all over Brazil, all over the world, been able to do all of those things. Unfortunately, he was also a gambler. So to be honest, this is honesty here.
Right.
So every time he made money, he would lose money, But
right.
he did have tremendous accomplishments, and he never saw his limitations.
Right.
Which is something that I don't possess that quality. I'm always looking at, like, I can do better. But he didn't. He'd walk into a room, and he would think about, like, I own this room. What am I going to get out of this relationship? So I think it's wonderful. My mother, on the other side, was very young, 14 when they met, and 15 when they comprometidos, got together, and very naive, came from campo, just like, and from an educated family, but they didn't really understand like New York, So my grandmother had to survive after my grandfather left by being a seamstress in a factory and supporting her family. My mother said she never knew poverty. She always felt like, she had enough to eat and enough clothes to wear, and always felt safe and taken care of, because that was my grandmother. But my mom got married off very young. So imagine, 16, 17, and then having myself and my brother, and being I can't even imagine at my age, just having 17-year-old, having a family in New York, and she's not accustomed to it. She came here when she was 13 years old, So I just think it's a remarkable story of resilience, because... And I think all of these little things that, we stand on their shoulders. We are able to take things from my mamita, as I call her, my abuela, and my mom, doing all these incredible things and being able to survive and look for a job when she wasn't married any longer, to take care of us with no high school credentials. She got her GED eventually, but she didn't graduate from high school because she was too young. She got pulled out of school. And so, it is remarkable how we are able to thrive despite the circumstances. And I think a lot about our community now, our immigrant communities, and how they are so resilient, and how, particularly Latinas, and this being Women's History Month, and, all of these like trailblazing Latinas who were able to go through these really tough circumstances, and because of those circumstances grow stronger and stronger and be able to accomplish amazing things.
Right.
So...
And to do it so selflessly, right?
Yeah.
It's important for us to understand that those previous generations, my grandmother came from Puerto Rico also, and worked in the sweatshops in the garment district.
Yep.
She was an expert seamstress. And unfortunately, during those times, that's when they had a couple of those fires that killed so many, Latino and Latina workers in the garment district, and, all kinds of fire regulations and codes changed because of it. But they understood that their sacrifices were not necessarily going to benefit them, but it would benefit their children and their children's children, right? So those sacrifices and the aspiration to be generationally kind of improved, were so important. And like you said, we are standing on their shoulders.
We really are. It's just amazing how... And my grandmother, because she had the ability to sew and she was very creative, used to make our clothes.
Right.
And so I'm sure a lot of us share the same stories, and just that creativity and putting that together. So we always look put together.
Sure.
That was always really important for us. And I see the pictures of my mom and her siblings and my grandmother. I mean, always siempre vestida tan linda, just like everything in order, and having a lot of pride, and despite their circumstances, despite the fact that they really didn't have a lot of money, they really did a whole lot.
So you transitioned now from Queens to Long Island.
Yes.
Why did that come about, and how was that experience?
Okay. Yes. So my mom did not stay married to my dad, and so she divorced him. We went to go live with my grandmother, and when I was living with my grandmother and my aunt and everybody, that was to me was the happiest time of my life.
Right.
You know, we were all together. You know, people would come in from Puerto Rico and stay in the basement, and you know, it was always like you never knew who was going to be in the house. You know, and it was always like it smelled like coffee all the time, and just like really happy place. But then my mom, you know, as a grown woman, wanted to get remarried, and she did get remarried. And the American dream, per se, was to have a house and, you know, a yard and the white picket fence and the whole thing. So her husband said, you know, we're going to save up and we're going to buy a house on Long Island. So, you know, I didn't know anything from Long Island. I was going to Catholic school, you know, in Queens, and, you know, I love my friends, and they all look like me. And then we moved to Levittown. And it was really quite traumatic, a change for us. And I think it was traumatic because not only moving away from that safety of being with family and the love that you're constantly surrounded by, but also moving to an environment where there was no one that looked like me. You know, Levittown was, and thankfully it's changed tremendously since then, but it was notorious for being, you know, quite a racist community. And so much that they've written, they've done documentaries about it. My parents did not know that, obviously, at the time. What they saw was a house across the street from a little park with a little village green, and, you know, it seemed ideal. You know, I had my own bedroom. I used to share a room with my brother. We had bunk beds, and the room was the size of the bunk beds. So it was, and we would constantly fight. I'm like, who would be on the top and who would be on the bottom? It was probably the size of a pantry area, but we didn't realize that. But I got my own room. It was like incredible. But, you know, the first day of school, it was really quite a shock to the system when people didn't know what I was, literally. So I would be asked the question at 8 years old, what are you? So they didn't know about Latinos. There were no other Latinos in our community at all. There was one family, but I didn't go to school with them. So trying to explain what I really didn't understand, my Latinidad, you know, just who I was, to another 8-year-old, you know, little, you know, white kid. And for my brother, it was very tough because they picked on me because my brother and I, you know, he is fair. He has, you know, lighter complexion, more like my mom, and I look more like my dad. So my complexion made me the target, and he, as the boy, was the defender. So it was tough on him as well. But yeah, just it was really a struggle. I always tell, and I tell this story a lot to, I mentor young girls through the Latina Mentoring Initiative, that even though you may not look like anybody else, you have so many strengths and beauty and gifts that you're bringing, but you need to be reminded of that. You need someone to tell that to you. You need to share, have somebody share that with you, and that's what we try to do with them, to make them feel beautiful. Those are back days of, you know, Farrah Fawcett and,
right,
you know, blonde hair and blue eyes is beautiful and everything. So I thought it was ugly. You know, I didn't fit in any way. So I decided that, you know, I was smart. I was going to focus on my academics and reading and learning as much as I could, and, you know, being a little bit of a brown nose with the teachers, you know, so that I would get in with them and felt safer with them in terms of the education, but didn't really have a community, you know. And so that's why I love when, you know, my colleague Dorothy Santana, the Latina Moms Connect, building community is one of the most important things you can do. I think that I help to build community as well, because we need it, and the generations need it, and they need to be reminded of all the incredible things in our ancestry, in our history, in our ethnicity, in our all those wonderful stories. And, you know, learning about, for me, you know, as an adult, I didn't learn this as a child, about the Taínos, and, you know, all that strength that we derive from our indigenous roots, on both sides for me, because of the Peruvian as well. So it was quite a difficult time. for me, and it's something that I get emotional about because it feels, as a young girl and knowing who I was and being very innocent, there was a lot of hate, and so I've become very sensitive to that, and I think even now I feel a resurgence, of a lot of hate towards our community, and I am particularly triggered by it because of my personal experience, but it's just, to me, so illogical given the contributions that Latinas and Latinos have made to our communities, So, I feel our job is to educate people,
Right.
to say that, we're doing a lot of good in the communities, not just for Latinos, but generally for everybody. In my organization, it's not 100 Hispanic Women, but Center for Family Support. We support individuals and families with disabilities, So there's so many ways that we contribute back to the community. I know I digress. Sorry.
No, you didn't. Not at all. I think it's important that, so many of the points that you just made, it's important that we continue to champion that ideology.
Yeah.
Because typically any hate comes from fear, from my opinion at least.
I agree.
And so whether, hatred towards people with disabilities because they're afraid of that person's disability, or whether it's Latinos or, God forbid, religious-based Muslims or what have you, it's typically a fear that they don't understand, they don't feel comfortable, and as a result, let me push them away and let me, make them less than, right? And I think the more we talk about it, the more we show our communities how we have more in common than differences, and how most of our desires, our wants are the same. Hopefully at some point, we can kind of defeat this hate, right, that's out there. And it will never end, right? Whether it's the civil rights movement in the 60s or whether it's, 2025, and unfortunately we have an anti-immigrant, ideology that's very, kind of in our everyday news or what have you. We need to continue to talk about our life experiences and talk about the resilience of people like you. So you were essentially placed into an area that was redlining at the time that was probably just miraculous that your family was even allowed to buy a house in that area, because people were not allowed into those communities.
There was a way because my stepfather was Italian.
Right.
Descent. So
but had they found out in advance that your mom was Puerto Rican,
in there now.
right, that would not have been approved. I guarantee you that those realtors or that community would have found some way to excuse the sale and to, kind of maybe push you into another community, right? So you were placed into a community that wasn't as supportive as it needed to be, and in some ways probably caused you trauma based upon what you're saying, right? Where you are now identifying with some of the similar types of behaviors today that is causing you some angst, right? So in your schools, you found the peace of your teachers and you found a focus on academics to kind of drive you through it. But at home, what kind of support did you get from your family and your relatives in order to get through those challenging times?
Yeah. Well, I think that was it, is that I didn't really I had my mom, of course, and her husband, my stepfather, but we didn't have our family around us.
Right.
So, the typical resources that I would go to, I would always go to my mamita, At that point, people started moving back to Puerto Rico. A lot of them went to the Bronx or whatever, and then eventually everybody moved back. So the occasional visit, and of course my mother was very intentional about us going to Puerto Rico in the summer and at Christmas time, and so we had that connection to our culture that way, and always doing the parrandas and everything else. But we didn't have it in our community. We didn't have the family present, so because everybody had kind of dispersed. I became very adaptive. I learned to adjust, which has been really helpful for me. But it took me a while to get back to who I was authentically, as a Latina, because you try so hard to fit in, you're not yourself anymore.
Right.
So to find your way back, and it takes a lot of effort to find your way back and really get to who you really are.
Right.
And my family always took tremendous pride in our history. My grandfather's side, we have like poets, and we have Luis Torres is somebody who was related to us on my grandfather's side, who is an incredible poet from Puerto Rico. They're authors and painters and musicians and very artsy family. And, that was always something that I held on to, because I love that we have that rich cultural, artsy background in our family. But it wasn't present in the everyday. It was something that I knew was connected to me, but not something that I could access all the time. My mother was very intentional about speaking to me in English. English was not my first language, but she wanted to make sure that we spoke without an accent. And my father only spoke to us in Spanish, so he would never speak to us in English. So and in a way, it kind of benefited me because I had the option, obviously, but I also had built up vocabulary in both languages. On the other side, in terms of my father, I would see him every other weekend for visits. So we still had the Peruvian side connection that was going on. So I did have some resources there. I know my brother particularly had a very close relationship with my grandfather on my father's side. So it wasn't completely, without the Latina culture in our lives.
So you get to high school. How was your high school experience? What do you focus on? Do you start getting involved in the school in sports or extracurriculars or anything?
I don't do any of that.
So you just focus on academics?
Yes. I focus on academics, and I tried to fit in as much as possible. I wanted to be popular, but it wasn't necessarily that popular. I was very shy. So I was in what they called AP classes.
Right.
So I had the same group of people from 7th grade that I went through. You see the composition of the people all the way through the end of high school. So it was like the nerd class.
Right.
We were together. I was, like I said, very shy. I grew up in a very strict household, in terms of like going out at night and doing all that stuff. I had to be home by like 9 o'clock, whatever. So there wasn't a lot of like that socialization aspect, and I wasn't an athlete by any stretch of imagination. I was the last one that was picked on the teams or whatever, but I found my way. High school, to be very honest, is listening to other people's stories, was not a pleasant experience for me. I was feeling like a social misfit.
Did you, now being that same group kind of stayed, that core group of students, right, stayed together for so long, did you find an acceptance eventually?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, within our group, we were fine.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was one or two people that I became closer to because we've been together.
And were you able to show your true identity and your true self to them, or did you still have to kind of maintain the assimilated kind of view?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I see it, I see when I look back and I look at the pictures, I could tell I was trying hard to like do my hair in a way that every other girl was doing their hair, and, trying to look white.
Right.
It's like, that was, to be honest.
Right.
And it just, there weren't any other Latinas there, so I wasn't able to connect with that aspect of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now you get close to graduation. You're focused on obviously some sort of university, some sort of college academic career, etc. What are you focused on doing, and what's your next step?
So my next step was to start getting flooded after the SATs came, getting flooded with, I guess, those packages that they would send you. It was a bit overwhelming. It was like local schools, and there was, schools that were away, and I was intrigued by all of that, but I was also very fearful. I'm still an introvert. I was very, very shy. So I had two friends, and one was a potential romantic friend, who were going to St. John's. So I decided that I was going to go to St. John's, and to play the safe bet. That was my choice. And I was pre-law, funny, and my major.
Great choice.
I thought so at the time, and my major was criminal justice. So, I wanted to become an attorney. That was, something that I had thought about for a long time. But I really didn't have, and I think this is not unusual, a lot of really great guidance. A couple of years after I'd started St. John's, people like, you really should have more of a liberal arts background, do something in political science or history or whatever, as opposed to criminal justice, unless you want to go into that specifically. But to me, going to college was that first day even, I just remember going onto the campus, just was such an eye-opener for me, because here I am, I'm back in Queens, right? And I'm like, oh my God, it's beautiful. It's a rainbow, It's like I get to see all sorts of people. And, I just felt immediately relieved, to be in a different space. And the other thing I recognized, which was really funny, is that I was not the smartest person in the room anymore. So immediately came to the realization, like, oh, there's some smart people here. I got to keep studying. But yeah, it was quite the experience. I think because of my own history and my family and my background, I wasn't able to have the focus that I wanted to have, early on. I was a very young 18, and I was very gullible, I was very susceptible, impressionable, all those words. And, I made, I was thinking about this interview, Mark, I was like, I made a lot of mistakes. And, I got married very young. I was only in school for a little less than 2 years at St. John's, and I met my husband at the time, who was an attorney and a social worker. And, got pulled into this other path, and, I think it's important for women particularly to hear stories about us making mistakes, because it's not always going to be like Dorothy and that golden road and everything's going to be fine and picking daisies along the way. I think that my mistakes and failures have made me what I am today. And, I wanted to create, again, I think a feeling of safety and family by getting married, and certainly that was not what happened. But I learned from that experience, and, I always loved school, and I always tried to make my way back, and I went back and I did a little here and I did a little there, and I'm like, I got to get my act together and just finish this, So I was able to get a job in human services, very early 20s, and then go back to school and focus on, what it is that I needed to do, and just knew at that point I wasn't going to become an attorney, because I actually used to attend law school classes with my husband at the time before he graduated St. John's Law School. And recognized that in a way I have become, and abogado in Spanish is advocate, that I have become an advocate. Even though I'm not a lawyer, I'm an advocate.
Right.
So I guess my original goal was right, because that path was supposed to be, I was supposed to be an advocate. And then I couldn't stop going to school. So then I can go back, and I got 2 advanced degrees, after that. I'm considering, my husband will kill me by saying, getting a doctorate. but
don't let him watch the podcast.
I know. But it's just, there's something that excites me about learning, and the credentials are nice, the letters are nice at the end of the name, but that's not what really excites me. It's really the learning path, and I feel that the more I know, the more that I can give.
Right. It qualifies you for so many opportunities. It gives you wisdom. It gives you the opportunity to just understand things differently with a different lens, right?
Yeah.
So it's important that when you talk about your story, and you and I spoke before the podcast, I wanted people to understand your journey.
Yeah.
Because in your journey, whether there were mistakes or, areas of misfortune or whatever, detours for brief periods, those things are learning experiences that you can share. Exactly. Those are things that people can identify with and say, you know what, I had that same mistake. I went to Fordham University, you got one of your certificates from there, and I wound up having to drop out after 2 years, right? And then I went back at night to prove to myself that I could graduate from there, and I did. But my lack of focus, my lack of maturity, and various other issues didn't allow me to kind of stay on the straight path that so many people anticipate or that so many people assume,
Yeah.
are going to be as part of your journey. But there's all kinds of detours. Even you mentioned Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road. Even Dorothy and the Yellow Brick Road had many detours,
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
The Wicked Witch was really trying to block her,
Yeah.
her return home, right? So we all have challenges, and the resiliency that you show is inspirational to so many. And being that you didn't have the support that now today you support, that you give, right? So whether it's your agency or whether it's, the nonprofit or whether it's other groups like Latina Moms Connect and others that you are part of, where you're mentoring and you're providing a service, you're providing knowledge, you're providing some sort of counsel to individuals, you are advocating and you're doing great things in everything that you do. And the people who see this podcast will be able to identify with your journey. And so it's important that you talk about, the detours and the potholes, as we would
Yes,
call
the
them,
potholes.
right? And when you come from the boroughs, you always call them potholes, right? So you go through your academic career, you start focusing on that, and you get a new sense of energy and excitement in your life. Talk about your next chapter.
Yeah, I think, the path that got me to human services is really, I attribute it to my brother, because I was going down the wrong road, and I was very unhappy. I was not feeling satisfied in different things that I tried to pursue. And he encouraged me to try human services, to get into social services and to do the summer camp. And I ended up doing a summer camp and loving it, working with people with disabilities. They offered me a teaching position at United Cerebral Palsy. I didn't take that, but I ended up working for Catholic Charities. And I always say I took the stairs, not the elevators.
Right.
So I basically had every job to this job. But what I discovered is that I really enjoy leading people. And I would not have considered myself a leader. Like I would say, oh, no, I'm not a leader. But I am, And so I think that we have to, as women, we have to accept that and embrace it. So that we can create other leaders. I think that's one of the biggest characteristics of a leader is creating other leaders. And so at some point in my journey, and I think this is interesting, I was working in East Harlem for an organization, Edwin Gould at the time, did foster care, they did domestic violence, they did wonderful programs, and I was very proud to work for them. But there was a yearning that I was like, I have to give back. I've gotten so much. I have to give back to my community, to the Latina community. I need to find an organization that I could be part of. So I started typing in, Google and saying, Latina organizations, giving back, and 100 Hispanic women pops up. And I was like, wow, I started looking at the pictures and the girls and the mentoring programs and all this stuff. I was like, this is amazing. And I was like, where is this organization? Please tell me they're not in Chicago, whatever. It's like, I would be so upset. So, Mark, te voy a subir los pelitos. The 100 Hispanic women was in the same building that I was in 2 floors down.
Oh, my God.
So I literally shut my laptop and walked down the stairs.
And what building was that?
In 120th Street, right off of First Avenue in East Harlem. And they've been there forever. They're still there. And so I walked down, and Nancy Genova happened to be there, who was the president at the time, and her admin. And I said, you're not going to believe this.
Right.
I said, I just literally looked you up and whatever. And she was somebody, I still keep in contact with her. We still text each other. She's just a remarkable human being. She's somebody who can identify talent and say, I'm going to use you, because I said, use me. I can write grants, I can mentor, I could do this, I could write program. I'm a programming person. Whatever you need me to do. She's like, oh, we'll use you. We'll definitely use you. And like within the week, she had figured out something for me to do. And I ended up becoming the director of Milagros Valles O'Toole's Leadership Institute for Young Latinas. So in addition to my other job.
Right.
So in the Bronx. So it was really a remarkable experience. And I got invested in this organization and started attending their events and I just felt like I was back home again. Every moment that I spent amongst other Latinas and doing this work has fed me, and I feel that it's poured love into me, and it's been such a remarkable experience. And that was really like a pivotal moment in my life, and that was several years ago that happened. I want to say easily 10 years ago.
Right.
And I told Nancy, I was like, we got to do something. I was like, I can't keep driving to the Bronx. I was like, you need to open a Long Island one. So that was something that was under consideration. Then they had the expansion. But simultaneously in my career, I had a sponsor. We talk about angels. And funnily enough, my sponsor was a white male who worked at the organization, who saw that I was smart and driven and had capacity as a leader. And he said, I'm going to send you to Columbia to this program, the Senior Leader Program, Columbia University Business School. And that was another really pivotal moment for me, because I was in a space, I felt like an imposter, with all of these heads of organizations from all of New York City, but also the world.
Right.
This is global leaders. And it was just being in that space and then figuring out, like, yes, I belong in this space, that propelled me further in my leadership journey.
Now, along this journey, you've talked about how you have stepped up to volunteer, to provide service. Where did you get your support in order to make it through each chapter of your journey? Did you lean on any organizations, any individuals, any groups to help you avoid mines and to help you become more successful?
I think I identified certain individuals who were my colleagues that I work with, that I just really connected with and respected.
Right.
And they became sort of my informal network and resources.
Right.
I had an amazing boss. Her name is Sharon Madden, who I owe a great deal to, because I had a series of really terrible bosses, and then she came along. And she's just like this really strong Black woman who just told it like it was very straight with me, and she loved me, and I felt her love, and having women like that and other people like that in my network, that I could pick up the phone and say, listen, and that network keeps growing.
Right.
And so they really supported me. Of course, my family,
Right.
My nuclear family always supported me, and certainly my husband, over the last 10 years, put up with my insanity, so.
But I would imagine that because you didn't have what you're providing today, right, with all the various organizations that you volunteer at, that at times it must have been overwhelming or very, anxious for you to explore new opportunities, to take on new challenges, to maybe deal with your own sort of insecurities or what have you. How did you deal with those anxieties and maybe feeling overwhelmed at times?
Well, I didn't always do it well,
Right.
And I think that, our family, we all kind of suffer from los nervios, it's like that anxiety thing that runs. I said, we should get a family prize for therapy, because we always, I'm an over-preparer, I'm a perfectionist, and all these things. So, and I'm a worrier by nature. So I didn't always manage it well, but I think that, it really is my faith. It's something that I don't talk about very often, but I am a deeply spiritual person. And I don't think that I would have I don't know how anyone survives. I don't know how I would have survived without my faith. Simultaneously in my journey, I decided to become a spiritual director. I got confirmed when I was in my 40s, because I never got confirmed.
Right.
So I really came back. I came back to the church, but I really came back to God. And that just strengthened me in ways that I could have never anticipated. And it still strengthens me. It's still part of my everyday life. Right. So, yes, I rely on that.
So this is one of those points that I spoke to you about earlier, where I wanted people to listen to this podcast and say, well, I know Alicia, but I didn't know that, right? So I myself, I didn't know that about you. I'm an RCIA adult candidate as well. I made my confirmation as an adult. And I came back to a better relationship with God, right? And it was something that that I found to be totally needed in my life and uplifting, in every day thereafter, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, that's an amazing ability to focus on your faith and your spirituality. Now, let's talk about your current role, your job, the one you get paid for.
Oh, the one I get paid for.
Because you wear so many hats that I want to get specific to that. Talk to us about what you do, and tell us about what your accomplishments are.
Thank you. So right now, I am the CEO of an organization, Center for Family Support, that's in New York and New Jersey. We serve roughly 1,000 people and individuals and family members with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have about 1,500 staff across New York and New Jersey and our self-directed programs. And we've been around for 70 plus years. I worked for this organization before, and I knew I wanted to go back. And to come back in this role has been the honor of a lifetime. It's been really remarkable. I think the timing is just perfect because I see other Latinas and people of color coming into CEO roles in the New York City space and certainly on Long Island. And I'm so proud, and I think it's just like we're gaining momentum as nonprofit leaders. But I earned this. I definitely earned this. I worked very hard to get to where I am, and the organization is going through a transformation right now in terms of modernizing the infrastructure and systems, but a lot of investments been made in people, and I think that's so important to build a team. To make sure that we're investing in them, that we're pouring into them whatever they need, to do their jobs and to be happy in their jobs and to be productive in their jobs, and to be really tied to the mission of the organization. So we have even grown in the small time that I've been there in this role in 15 months, and we continue to grow, and we hope to continue to grow and have an impact. But I see the change that we make in people's lives, and that is what thrills me. It's what excites me. I have a deep passion for this work because I see the population as a population that's been disenfranchised for so long. And so bringing them in, including them as part of the inclusion process, and really focusing on the person
Right.
Instead of focusing on the disability or the
Right.
diagnosis has been our aim. And I think that, we've been very successful. We have a great reputation. And an amazing team that does this work every day.
Yeah, you focus on the humanity, right?
Yeah.
And
The
you
soul,
are
the soul of the work.
accomplished.
Mhm.
You are accomplished, and you're doing great things. So talk to our audience about how perhaps they can help you or volunteer or provide some sort of assistance with such a great organization like yours.
So I would encourage anybody to go to our website, to cfsny.org, to learn more about what it is that we do. And I feel like you have to connect to some aspect of our mission. We're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking, certainly, for funders. If there is some unique funder that's out there that may be interested in the work that we're doing and to give back to their community, we're open to that. And certainly any training or educational opportunities to be available, not just for the people we support, but also to our staff. I love bringing in advisors, people who want to buy a home, the first-time home buyers. Our staff are 70% women and women of color.
Right.
So, and they're typically single-head of households. So I want to help them as much as I can so they can thrive.
Right.
So anything that we can do for our staff, we want to do. And then certainly any in-kind contributions, we're open to that, and they can reach out to me directly. I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that.
So talk to us about your website and your social media existence, what social media
we're active on
platforms?
Facebook.
Okay.
We also on Instagram. On our website is our annual report, and we also have a YouTube channel. So
Okay.
we have lots of great stories of the impact that we've made in people's lives through the YouTube channel.
What website is that?
CFSNY.org.
Or .org.
Yeah.
Okay.
mhm.
Yep.
So Center for Family Support New.org. As I mentioned, we're in New York and New Jersey, but we also serve Long Island, Nassau County, and Westchester. So lots of places where we make an impact.
And how, if someone has someone that qualifies for some sort of support through CFS, they go on the website, they find out, and they can get some sort of support services?
Yeah, typically what they have to do is there is a system through obviously state and local government where you have to go what they call the front door. So you have to get eligibility first.
Right.
So once you're eligible, you work with your care coordinator, and the care coordinator can refer you to services at Center for Family Support.
Okay.
So they're the ones who help with the placement. It's a little convoluted, like you can't directly go to us for that. But we developed a new program, well, not us, but we have a new program called Self-Directed Supports. It's been incredibly successful, where families get a budget to support their family members with a disability, so they get to select the services that they want. They get to select the staff that they want to work with. And we act as a fiscal intermediary for those services. So it gives a lot of autonomy to families, so it's not like they're stuck just selecting one service from one provider. They can select from an array of providers or people to do services with their family member, whether it's their child or a sibling. So we provide supports to about 480 families currently.
But if me as a family member wanted to specifically get your agency to support my daughter or what have you, I would not be able to request that.
You can request it through your care coordinator.
Right. And
Yeah.
would that be something that would be respected or honored, or it depends?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So all the care coordinators have all of our contact information for every service we provide. And we provide residential programming, so we have actual places where people live, different levels of support in those programs. We have a lot of community-based programs. We also have services for children. So we go into people's home to help them with respite services or home care, so that we really help families that way. So it's enormously helpful. I wish we had more programming like that,
Right.
because people need it.
Right,
People need a break.
And are you funded through federal and state and county and local governments?
So I wish. Our funding is very limited to Medicaid primarily.
Okay.
So it's over 95% Medicaid funded. And we don't receive federal funding per se, which is why I'm not sweating right now. But
Right.
we do receive what they call a match from
Right.
federal government
Right.
for Medicaid. So we're all of us are very nervous
Right.
about whether anything's going to happen to that threshold. And then we do have some contracts, and we do, of course, have a foundation. So a foundation is where people can directly contribute, and that provides a lot of the innovative programming that we do that's not funded through Medicaid.
Right. Okay. All right. So, and as I mentioned earlier, you wear so many different hats. Talk to us about some of the other roles that you play in our communities that are making a difference, and tell us about how some of those successes are kind of developing.
Oh, thank you. So one of the things I'm super excited about is that I attended a program called Leaders of Color going back in 2022, and one of my colleagues in the program was Tanya Cabas. Tanya Cabas is the executive director of Somos, and she is amazing. She's an incredible human being and has just done remarkable things with the Somos conference. And shortly after she, started this job, which has been just a few years, she called me and she said, Entre Nosotras, which has been doing the luncheon forever, is not interested in doing it anymore. Would 100 Hispanic women be interested in doing a panel and doing the luncheon reception at Somos? I said yes. And she said, well, it's in 6 weeks. So I said, okay. And again, I have to go right to my community. So I pulled together our board and everybody who's interested. We were super excited. And I have to tell you, I'm so proud of even that first one. We did it on pay equity for Latinas. Latinas get paid, I'm going to get on my platform, 54 cents on the dollar.
That's
and
right.
That's not including the Latinas who come from Central America that get paid even less. And the needle has not moved.
Correct.
And this has been years. And I've been championing and educating people about this and pushing this agenda. So we did a presentation, a lunch, and for me personally, it was remarkable having Kristen Gillibrand do our keynote at that, 6 weeks away. I'm able to manage that, and then followed it up by Letitia James.
Right.
And I was just completely blown away.
Right.
We had an incredible panel. We had Jessica Ramos, Catalina Cruz, a remarkable, panel of powerful women talking about something and advocating for something in a room of close to 400 people. So I am really super proud of that. But I think that that was a way as a launch for more of those types of activities. And also because of that, connecting with elected officials, connecting with people in the provider community in New York City through the Fund for the City of New York, people like Diane Morales, who put together the POC network for CEOs of color. All of this has been building a momentum. I think this is our time. I just been feeling it for a while, where especially for Latinas, where we're really being recognized for our value and for what we're contributing to the community. For also our power, for economic power, what we do, our entrepreneurship. So that was a big one for me. So those things take a lot of work, and we just did a Somos one for Latinas in leadership and technology at this past Somos. But because of these continuing types of activities, we've grown our network exponentially. People know who we are, and that has been remarkable. We've built up the national board is going to have 2 New York State Supreme Court justices on it. We have Cristina Contreras, from New York Health and Hospital, who's going to be joining our national board. I mean, these are just remarkable women. So I do get involved with that with national, but even on a smaller scale, we have a Mind, Body, Spirit conference, which is coming up March 26th. And really to remember to do self-care, and because that's something we're always doing. We're not stopping to take care of ourselves. So the Mind, Body, Spirit conference is really just that, to really focus on those areas. So I moderated last year. I'll be moderating this year. We have Judy Torres, who's going to be the keynote speaker of it. Love Judy. And so it's really creating opportunities, and my staff are going to be invited. So last year we had like 15 people. Now we're doubling that. We're bringing 30 of my staff there, not including the 100 Hispanic Women board that's going to go there, because they loved it. They love being around these spaces with other women like that. I am also involved with the New York State Latina Mentoring Initiative through Governor Hochul. This is my 3rd year as a mentor. I love it. It really is a gift to me. It's something that I enjoy very much. And I work with Estrella from Uniondale School District, who's another remarkable human being. And, it's the stories of these young women. I always say, I wish I had this. I can't even imagine if I had this when I was younger. So I really try to give my all and try to make it, give them the education and the experiences and the context and the resources that they need in any way that I can. And they really develop really wonderful programming. We did something in a collaboration with the Hans Foundation, with the Beautiful Me. And it was very moving for a lot of us because Latinas are generally not one to think of themselves as beautiful that way, so especially young Latinas. So helping them recognize the beauty in themselves. So it's an incredible workshop program. We're able to bring it. So we try to do different things in collaboration with other entities. We had flamenco last year, which was really fun. And next week we're going to go visit a college campus. But again, these experiences are priceless for the youth. We really need to focus on the youth. And then I went to the Lilta conference. Daphne Irizarry is another woman that I look up to so much. I think everybody on my board is just amazing. And she put together the conference. The first time I really wanted to be there. I took the day off to be there, to be a panelist, and just amazed, just the sea of young girls.
Right.
And everybody who volunteered their time to be there and create such a beautiful day. It was such a successful day. But I think when you make these connections with other organizations, I try to work with everyone. We work with Cornell, and we did Bloom. The Bloom event was, I think you were there too, where we worked to bring wellness initiatives to Latinos on Long Island. So anybody bilingual, bicultural resources for our population. So it's in the collaboration that we have power.
Right. No, it's critical that partnership, those collaborations are done and multifaceted, because the exponential impacts can't be measured. And the changes that they make in this world are just undeterminable, because you and I did not have those support groups, those options for mentoring that perhaps our young people do, right? And so that means they're going to be that much more advanced in the process. They're going to be able to avoid the minefields
Yes.
and make wiser decisions, right? More prepared decisions, right? You said you're an over planner. So for those that are over planning, well, guess what? Then I'm going to help you with that plan, right? So have you identified anything in the upcoming year that you want to focus on when it comes from your perspective in your leadership role?
Yes. So when it comes to this community and the 100 Hispanic women, there's a lot of work to be done. But I think because of what's happening right now in our communities in this environment, we had started a Somos Long Island channel on a WhatsApp, and it started. And Tiffany, she started it, and we started all contributing to it and adding. And then she created a Google sheet. One of the things that I would love to launch, and I'd love to find funding to launch this, is to create a coalition for Long Island Hispanic serving institutions. I think that a lot of us serve Long Islanders and serve Latinos in the community, and that sometimes we work at cross purposes, and sometimes there's overlap between events and things like that. Some cohesion, because I think that bring everybody together, and then somebody would be able to coming to Long Island saying, okay, I'm in Long Island and I'm in Bayport or I'm in Levittown or I'm here, and I need this service. They would be able to access it through a website, through getting an app. There's other things that they can do so they know where to go for resources, whether it's Latina Sisters, whether it's an immigration lawyer, all of these resources would be readily available. That's my goal for this year. I've been thinking about it for a while, so I talked to Tiffany, but I was like, let's make this happen.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a great idea, and the fact that I'm getting pinged on my phone on a regular basis, now getting more information so that we're not all siloed, right? And we're able to share each other's information and have our, clients in our small space, learn and take advantage of these other opportunities.
And we do it now informally. You get a phone call or I get a phone call or somebody gets a text and, this one's in trouble, they need this and that. And I was like, oh, call fulano de tal, whatever, I know what they do. But to have it actually structured in a way that makes it accessible to everybody who needs the services and also to support each other.
Right.
We try to get to each other's events, as much as possible. And so I think there was one year that Hispanic Counseling Center and Sepa Mujer had their event on the same day.
Right.
Oh, my gosh. You can't split yourself in two.
Correct.
So.
Well, and hopefully this network will, take care of those conflicting events like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. So talk to our viewers about how they can find out more information about 100 Hispanic Women of Long Island.
Okay. So go on to the 100 Hispanic National website. And then we have an actual link where you can learn more about the Long Island programs, and you can see all the board members currently, and there's also a link to connect to find more information about becoming a member. One of the things I do want to mention about 100 Hispanic Women is the programs. Well, we provide mentoring programs, but we also provide scholarships. We were able to provide 7 scholarships last year. We did get some funding from Ocean Financial. Thank you, Ocean Financial, for Malloy scholarships. We love to build relationships with universities so that they can provide matching funds. And these are for undergraduate and graduate scholarship programs. So if they come to the website, and they could be led directly to me or reach out to me directly at President Long Island 100 Hispanic Women.org. So at Gmail, sorry. Then they can reach out to me directly.
And what about social media presence?
We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram as well.
Okay. And what I want our audience and our viewers to know is that we as men can be members of 100 Hispanic Women and should be members. Not can be, but should be and must be. Because many of us, like myself, were raised by very strong women, and the most influential people in my life were 2 women that were ahead of their time. And I myself was a 100 Hispanic Women member when I was a young buck in Verizon, and I had mentors within the Verizon Corporation. And I got to meet Shirley Rodriguez-Romaninski and so many other dynamic women that were able to inspire me to be a better man, but for me to be a better collaborator and partner with our women who need, partnership and allies in order to get rid of that disparity of income and all of the rest of the unfortunately male-dominated kind of, things that are going on within our society. So I applaud you for all of those things. Now, as far as 100 Hispanic Women is concerned, what types of volunteer opportunities are there? Talk to our audience about that. What are your needs? Do you have a social media need? Talk to the
Yeah,
viewers.
luckily we do have Liz Gutierrez, who's amazing, our
Right.
social media chair, who manages a lot of that. But we're always looking for volunteers. We particularly need volunteers around organizing special events. There's a lot of work that's involved, a lot of details. We also need volunteers to join our different committees, the scholarship committee, which is something that's very popular, a program committee. We did a program called Ready, Set, Succeed for young Latinas who are in the college environment. We did it at Malloy University, so volunteers to help facilitate some of those sessions for the young girls. And then just, any other tasks related to any of our events to make sure that they're increasing our social media presence, expanding our reach to other people to learn about what we do.
Awesome. So in closing, I always ask my guests to talk to our viewers, our audience, and share with them some words of wisdom, some words of inspiration, something that you want them to be left with your appearance here, and something that they should understand about your story. What would you tell our viewers now?
It's something that I tell the young girls when I meet with them. It's very important. It's something that I had suffered from, but being so overly focused on what people thought of me. I think about what you want. Think about what your dreams, aspirations are, and what you want from life. And don't be so focused on others and others' impressions or perceptions of you. And particularly in social media, comparing yourself to others is the surest way to unhappiness. So, look at other people in terms of role models, figure out who it is that you want to be like, and go for it, and be brave.
Awesome. Alicia, I applaud everything that you've accomplished, and I'm confident that you're going to accomplish so much more. I thank you for what you're doing for our communities, whether it's your paid role or your volunteer roles that you have many of. You're an inspiration to me, to my daughters. You're an inspiration to our communities. You are a true champion, and therefore you are part of our champion circle and part of our chosen family. So thank you for being here with us
Thank
today.
you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you. So on behalf of Liga de Justicia Abogados, Liga de Justicia Foundation, Alicia McGrath, all of our viewers that are so loyal and faithful and supportive of our podcast, I want to thank you for listening, for hearing about Alicia McGrath's journey, her story that is so inspirational. And I ask you to stay tuned for more stories in the future. Stay blessed.